Well, good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's a great pleasure to see so many people here. It's a sea of faces. And I like to think that this is actually a world first that we're here today. No one else has organized a festival of this kind anywhere in the world, to my sure and certain knowledge. I'm not tentative about this. It's very important what we're doing, and we're trying to raise the profile of philanthropy in our region. And our general thesis is, if you know a little bit about the past, you will be inspired by it, and it will help you now, today, and it will help carry us into the future. Now, Sandra's already told you the story of the lift, and it was a harrowing moment, I have to tell you. It really worked my nerves up. But before I begin, I do want to say this. I am a complete fraud. Of course I am. I'm a fraud because I have not done this work on my own. I have not done the research on my own. I've done it with 3 other people, Mari McLean, who's not here this morning. But there are 2 of the people who've done the work here this morning, and I'd just like them to stand up and I'll introduce them to you. There's Michael Price, who's a research associate of mine, and he has done a lot of the work on the profiles you see on the web, and Vesla Harisanova, who is responsible for the presentation you're about to see. So I just want to credit them because it's important that I do so. Okay, what did we actually do? Well, when we began, we knew so little. We turned every stone we could. We had luck. We had the luck of having brilliant historians in this region. Richard Lomas, who was at Durham for many, many years, is now emeritus there. Norman McCord, who was at Newcastle University, and John Cannon, who died a couple of years ago. Without the work that these people had done before us, we really couldn't have actually begun to tell the story of philanthropy in the region. But we did dig around, and we've dug around an awful lot. We found a lot of things out. And I can't tell you all those things this morning. It's impossible to do so. We then engaged in a process of sense-making and asked ourselves, what does all this mean? And that's what I'm going to talk about this morning. Not so much the specifics, but the meaning of the research and what we've found out. Well, that's me. It should also have the other 2, shouldn't it, really? So, philanthropy, many definitions, as Sandra said. But I like to think of philanthropy really as this. I like to think of it as the over and above, the things we do that are extra, the things we don't have to do, the things we do because we care about society as a whole. That's the importance of philanthropy. It's the caring beyond ourselves, beyond our families, in a wider sense, for the communities we are part of. And of course, philanthropy is not just about rich people. Philanthropy is inclusive. It's something that everybody can contribute, and most people in Britain do contribute to through their donations or through their time as volunteers. They give back. People who run community groups, or guides, or whatever, these are very important in our society, and they are heroic in their own way. So that's the take that we generally have, an inclusive process. The best way to present this, we felt, was to just tell you the top 10 things that we've found. But obviously, I can't tell you everything about it, but you can go to the website. You can see the profiles of philanthropists. You can see the profiles of beneficiaries. You can study there the trusts and foundations that support our region. And you can read the essays that we've written specially for this festival about understanding philanthropy and about the story of philanthropy in the region. So I heartily recommend that you do that. For any superficialities that you hear in the next few minutes, I apologize, because 900 years is a long time, and it's a lot to actually cover. So we divided the work into 4 conventional historical periods: the Middle Ages, the early modern period, the modern period, and the age in which we now live, the contemporary world. So try to take yourself back to the Middle Ages. One of the things that really explodes in your mind is this. In 1066, the date of the conquest, the population of this region was 20,000. That's less than people who live in Gosforth today. That's the entire region is 20,000 people. Britain only has a population of 1.7 million at that time. Small population. The thing that the conqueror and the conquerors wanted when they came to Britain was the rich landholding that Britain had. Britain was a land with plenty of land to conquer. And this is what brought the Normans here. Not the glory of the crown, not the romantic stuff you see, but the brute reality of taking over another land. This is an important thing to bear in mind. It's important to bear in mind because we, in this region in the northeast, were effectively a buffer zone between the Scots north of us and the more prosperous lands south of the Tees. We weren't even included in Domesday Book 1086, so we didn't get a reckoning at that point. What is amazing is what a good job the Normans did at what they set out to do. Between this period, within a couple of hundred years, down to say 1300, 1350, the land is filled up. It becomes populated. At the top, of course, you've got the king, and then below that, you have the barons, the great landowners who've got estates of 100,000 or more acres spread across Britain. Okay, and then locally, you've got the lords, the Norman lords who come in, the Sir X, the Sir Y, the Sir Z, and they are controlling the expansion and growth of the region, and it fills up. And it gradually becomes a little bit more prosperous. So what is the role of philanthropy in this? What is the role of voluntary giving in this region that's becoming populated? Well, the role is no less than the making of a society. Philanthropy is crucially engaged, voluntary giving on the part of those who had the wealth, had acquired the wealth, to actually create a social structure and a social system. So what did they do? Well, of course, this is an age in which the Catholic religion is very important. It's very important to the Normans. And they built churches. So we see, down to the Black Death, 1348, just to give you the figure, the date, down to the Black Death, we see church building all over the region. It's either rebuilding old churches, or it's installing new churches, or it's going to stone churches instead of wooden churches. And these churches become adorned, and they're important to the people. They're important to everyone. They create something that is stable, something that can be held on to by everyone. For the more zealous of the people, the more zealous lords, they invested not only in the church, in priests, creating the infrastructure, they invested in monastic houses. We had none of those in the north in 1066. We had the community of St. Cuthbert at Durham. That was the sole remaining survival. They'd been hounded out from their original home, driven to Chesterley Street and thence to Durham by the Viking invasions, which, remember, are immediately prior to the conquest. So, very important, they found these monastic institutions, and within a couple of centuries, we've got 13 of those. We've got 3 nunneries, 10 monastic institutions. Durham, of course, is the center of that area. The third thing they do is to build up the body of priests in the area. This is known as chantries All right, so what is a chantry? You're trying to have your immortal soul removed of the stain of sin that you've achieved during your life. And according to the doctrine that prevailed at the time, you could assist yourself in doing that by people praying for you. You could get people to pray for you if you hired the priests, either before death or at death, to say these prayers for you, and that's called a chantry. It's called a chantry. It was a way of building up the priesthood in the region. But not everything was to do with religion. Two other important quasi-religious things that are powerfully influenced by religion, are number one, the formation of almshouses or hospitals as they were known at that time. And you see a rash of these. The first major almshouse in this region is 1181, built by Bishop Hugh de Puiset. And then there follows in the next century the Hospital of God at Gretham. Those are in Durham. In Newcastle, the first is in 1195, and that's the Hospital of St. Mary the Virgin. So, very quickly, these places that are to cater for the sick, the leprous, the elderly, come into being. And these are genuine and major, important philanthropic institutions. What's their importance? Wow, they survive today. They are still with us. That's a very important thing, isn't it? That something founded so long ago can endure the ages, prove its worth, and still be with us today. These important acts of philanthropy. On a more secular note, of course, you can't build an economy, build a region, build a society that has no roads, no towns, no markets, and you need infrastructure to do that. And these infrastructure creations, the bridges that are built in this period, are effectively, the bridges, the roads, they are philanthropic endeavors. They are voluntary gifts to society. And then finally, just so to round this period off, if you think it's all about the rich, it is not. I would bet that not many people in this room have heard of an institution called the ale, and it is just what it sounds like, the ale. Now, just to add a few hyphens to it, it might be a bride ale, giving to set a young couple up, a bride ale. It might be a help ale, to help somebody who is in need or in desperate need. Or it might be a church ale, to help the church. And these ales essentially are local people gathering together, and they brew a batch of ale, and they sell it at deliberately inflated prices. Sounds like a fundraiser to me. And they get the cash, and they give it to the individual or the institution in need. These ales were all over Britain. They were ubiquitous, okay, and they were very powerful social institution in the emerging Northeast. So already we begin to see that philanthropy takes on quite a burden. Voluntary giving. You didn't have to do this. It may have improved your status in society to be a giver, a donor. It may have brought indirect rewards, but you didn't have to do this. And it helps lay the fabric, the social foundations of our society. Moving on, the early modern period. Just very quickly, you all know in this room the Tudors and the Stuarts. You know the big things that happen. You know about the 6 wives. You know about the dissolution of the monasteries, 1536 to 40, just in case you don't have it in your head. You know about the Spanish Armada, okay? You know about the end of the Tudors and the union of the crowns in 1603, and you know about the Civil War, and you know about Cromwell, and you know about the Glorious Revolution of 1688. You know that James II disappeared and was replaced by William and Mary at the end of the Stuarts. You know about the union of parliaments in 1707. Okay, so you know all these things, but what you don't know, in all likelihood, is that during this early modern period, Britain got better, got richer, it got wealthier, it recovered from the Black Death and so on. And philanthropy is tied up with this process of recovery and unification and the process of state building. So what did it actually contribute? Number one, it contributed an awful lot to education. The grammar schools emerge first. They're followed by a wave of charity schools, especially between 1700 and 1750. 136 of them founded by philanthropy in this region alone in a 50-year period. If you wonder, and have ever wondered, how did we stop being illiterate and become literate? This is the process. And by 1819, if you look at the league table of children attending schools, there are 42 counties in Britain, and you will find that Durham is number 2, second best, and Northumberland is number 5. These are major achievements of philanthropy. The second major thing, as Jordan tells us, the famous historian, this is the period when giving for the poor really became very, very important. And I've had the good fortune of being able to trace in our records locally just how much giving there was. And I'm going to just leave this period with one highlight of this. Most studies of philanthropy are based upon London. And what they show is the poor were catered for after the 1601 Poor Law by about, this is very, very rough indeed, a third by rich people giving, a third by congregations, and a third by the poor rate. What's remarkable is that Newcastle, which is the city we have details for, is more or less the same as London. And the numbers are almost exactly the same. It's a remarkably important thing. Nobody's done this before. It's an important thing. So philanthropy is helping build our state, building our society in the Northeast. Moving on. The modern period, you know about it, okay? You know about the modern people because it's proximate. It's near to touching point. The British economy becomes transformed. The population doubles, trebles between 1750 and 1850. It doubles again to reach new heights by 1950, between 1850 and 1950. So there's tremendous growth, and it's fueled by industrialization. The Northeast is a late industrializer. The prize on industrialization goes to Lancashire and Yorkshire and London. It does not go to the north. But what we do have is this phenomenal thing, coal. 42% of coal output at the beginning of the period, and it takes off like a rocket, and it drives economic growth, and it sucks people into these communities. It creates wealth. And with this wealth, you see the great flowering of philanthropy in Britain, echoed here in the Northeast. Absolutely everything you can touch is more or less voluntary. And I'm just going to tell you the Imagine game. Imagine all the churches built in this period, right? Imagine those, all the denominations that are flowering after 1688 and religious toleration. Right, the Baptists, the Methodists, they're all at it, right? They're all at it. And how are they doing it? Some is giving by the rich, but most often it's people subscribing together, coming together and chipping into the pot. It's called subscription philanthropy. You see the same in supporting the community and the poor. You see the same in education. And you see it in health. This is the great period of health creation, right? The RVI, Newcastle Infirmary, 1751, a date to remember, one of our finest institutions. But it's not just the RVI, it's many other hospitals, and it's the dispensaries that cater for the very, very poor indeed. People who've got fever, people who are dropping down, they've got smallpox or whatever they've got. Where are they going to go and find help? They find it through philanthropy and through charities. Think of higher education in this period. Okay, what have you got at the beginning? You've got nothing. Okay, what do you have in 1832? You have the University of Durham. The University of Durham is created in part, large measure, as a philanthropic act by Charles Thorpe and Bishop Van Mildert. The University of Newcastle, which comes along later, is then part of Durham, but it too is founded on philanthropy. And if you think of its two great wings, you think of its medical faculty of 1834, and then you think of the College of Physical Sciences, 1871. It's a subscription list. It's not some wealthy donor. It's a lot of people feeding money in to create what has become a great educational institution. And then just think of all the wealth that then gets poured into our museums and our art galleries. This again is philanthropy. Think of our parks and gardens. Think of the environmental charities that grow in this. This is the great flowering of philanthropy. And then just linking to what Hugh says, in the age when deindustrialization kicked in, we didn't know this was going to happen in 1939. We had no idea how severe this region would be challenged post-war. But the challenge indeed has been very, very great indeed. And it has brought us low, it brought high unemployment, it brought immense social problems. And I just want you to sort of think in your mind how much worse this would be. And I want you to think of a paradox. The paradox is this: how come this region has created the greatest, biggest, best community foundation in Tyne and Wear, Northumberland, in the UK? How come it's in the region suffering the most? And the answer is that what you actually see here is a very strong regional identity. And so when you see the Shears and the Barbers, the Ballingers and so on, the people you know about in this room, this is a response to observable problems and a way of actually fighting back. And this is a noble and important thing. So that's the history lesson in a very short space of time. So moving on, what's special about the Northeast? Well, first of all, it is this. We had the wealthiest bishops with the most power in Britain, more or less. And it's known as the Palatinate of Durham. And in the Palatinate of Durham, if you wonder, why does so much come out of the church? Why do you get them involved later in the formation of the University of Durham? Why the early almshouses of such distinction? Why the foundation of Durham School? It comes back to the fact that they have a special position under the Crown, and they have rule of law is administered by the bishops of Durham. It's called a peculiarity. And Durham is a peculiarity on a big scale. 674,000 acres of peculiarity. So Durham is important. The second is Newcastle. Newcastle has a particular cohesion as a community. It's a really good example of how the gentry work together with central government to actually institute the rule of law and create and engage in state building. So where do the Lord Lieutenants come, the sheriffs, the aldermen, the mayors? They're all the same clique, the same community. It's tight-knit. It's tight-knit and it spans all religions. But what it means is these people are very alive to the necessity to act. So Newcastle is almost invariably an early mover. When something takes off nationally, probably in London, we are generally number two. Classic example, the Lying-in Hospital. The Lying-in Hospital here, 1760, of course, it's where Newcastle Building Society are now. This is the rebuild in 1826. This is important because it's the first outside London. Again, the RVI, very early, and so on. We tend to move quickly. And the third is regional identity, which gives us this singularity of purpose and cohesion. And I think we all in this room know about that singularity of purpose and cohesion. So I'm not going to go on about it anymore. The next important finding is this. Enterprise is always the motor force of philanthropy, right? It's either enterprising bishops or it's enterprising entrepreneurs and business people. Why? Because you need wealth in order to be able to invest philanthropically. So in our territory, we see coal fortunes leading to great things. We see shipping fortunes leading to great things. We even see the humble bottle of Domestos, this is the Handley charity, leading to great things. Kills all known germs dead. Remarkable phrase, but a wonderful thing that these entrepreneurial fortunes gathered together have actually created so much. And you can see that in medieval roads and bridges, charity schools, hospitals, and you can see it in the contemporary transformational philanthropists like Jonathan Ruffer and Peter Vardy. Moving on. Philanthropy is a source of social innovation. What that means simply is this. Philanthropy tends to be in at the beginning. So if you think of literacy, it's in at the beginning. The state comes second, philanthropy comes first. And it's a pattern that repeats itself time and time again. And I invite you to think of the modern hospice movement, right? The modern hospice movement is really a post-war phenomenon. But what would we do without it, without people who are suffering and families who are suffering, having recourse to hospice movement? And it's a very important thing. And of course, it's philanthropically funded. Number 5, social activism is important. So it's not just about cash. You need people who've got ideas about what beneficial change will bring. So when you look at someone like Spence Watson, he's part of the Quaker community. The Quaker community are very, very, very interested in social change. That's why they're to the fore in anti-slavery. Right, they're to the fore in anti-slavery along with the evangelical Christians. And it's important they win that battle. That's a philanthropic battle. Spence Watson and his family, the Mersers as a family, are into these kind of change. And they help to create a platform for change. They serve to gather the subscription list together. So if you think how Newcastle University happened, it happened through these sorts of people. So they're social activists. Now, some philanthropists are also social activists. So I invite you to think of, why does Peter Vardy do Safe Families for Children? He's acting as an activist. He has a theory of change. So with social activism, you need a viable theory of change. If we do this, things will get better. This humble gathering, our festival, has a theory of change. The theory of change is, if more people understand the good that philanthropy does and has done in the past, the more they will commit themselves to the cause of philanthropy. That's our theory of change. Number 6. So philanthropy is not just about mega donors. I've mentioned the ales of medieval England. I should mention the guilds, who are also serving to bring about change. Subscription philanthropy, that's what the lists look like. You can read off the people. Note how many of those people are anonymous. Not everybody wants to say, I am a philanthropist. I just want to give some money. Note how many of those people, you can't probably read it from there, but I'll just tell you anyway. Note how many people are women. Right, so women get forgotten all the time. But if you read these subscription lists, the women are not lost. The women are actually to the fore. Note the little bit at the bottom there, again unreadable, and see where £150 came from to build the new lying-in hospital in 1826. 106 came from a music festival. And they thought, what are we going to do with the profits? Answer, we're going to give them to the lying-in hospital. Number 7. Prestigious institutions tend to attract a lot of philanthropy. They tend to be magnets for philanthropy. So when you think of, for example, the Great North Museum. Try and think in your mind, where did all those specimens come from? Where did all those artifacts come from? When you go to an art gallery, think, where did those paintings come from? And the answer is, they come from many people, not the few. They come from many people who are drawn to this cause that the institution itself represents. It's a marvelous thing that we have these magnets for philanthropy that sustain these institutions over the long term. Another finding that is of interest, I think, is this. Philanthropy often runs out of steam, right? So as you grow as an institution or as an organization, you tend to have to widen your funding base. So anybody in the room who knows the Newcastle Grammar School today will know that the main source of income is actually from fees. But you'll also know that philanthropy is important to a good degree at the margin. That the scholarship fund there is from philanthropy. So it remains important, but it becomes part of a wider funding mix. And there is a general rule. The general rule is this: the smaller the charity, the larger its dependency upon philanthropy. It almost invariably works that way. And as charities grow, they have to find contract income or they have to charge fees, and they develop into a mixed funding model. In my opinion, this is an outstandingly good thing. It's an outstandingly good thing because people are recognizing the importance that they too, in the charitable sector, need to be as entrepreneurial as you can possibly be. And it is proof of worth. It is proof of worth. Number 9, philanthropy is a two-way street. This is very important. What motivates people to give? This is a broad statement, but it is more or less the satisfaction of seeing the good that your gifts, your time, your money, it's the satisfaction of seeing what philanthropy does. That is the powerful motivator. The powerful motivator is not to receive a reward, an honor, or a distinction. Nice as those things are, that is not the primary thing. The primary thing is the satisfaction. And when you see that satisfaction, what happens is you go on a journey and you get drawn into philanthropy. This is what happens. You get drawn in, and through the good and the rewards, the satisfaction that you get, it encourages you. It's called a positive feedback loop. It encourages you to give more. And then number 10, last of our 10 findings. The past is important because it lives in the present and it points us to the future. The past lives in us because it lives in our institutions. If you go to a mighty institution like the universities, or you go to the RVI, or any one of our major hospitals, you will see the past embodied in them. Philanthropy has helped to create these wonderful things that persist and are a source of strength for our society, now and in the future. It exists also because some long-lived institutions miraculously survive on the endowments that they receive. Sherborne House still receives the income that was endowed to them through the estates that were given by Bishop Hugh de Puisay now, and they give grants to their community for elderly people and people in need today. How long is that? Okay, 800 years, more than 800 years on, it's still there doing that work. The past is living in the present, literally. And then finally, if we think of the endowed grant-making trusts and foundations, we have 33 of them operating in this region. They have a collective endowment of 550 million, and they're giving out grants of 60 million, say, a year. The past is living because those endowments, those gifts that were made in the past are paying out today. When Douglas Kellett gave his £5 million fortune emanating from coal, of course, and from his grandfather, when he gave that, what he is doing is endowing the future, elderly care in the future. And it requires a particularly good imagination to see that you can do good for a long term in perpetuity. And this, of course, is captured most famously by Sir William Leach. So what are the achievements then? Well, philanthropy's first into the fray. That's very important. It's a vehicle for change. Try to imagine the world without philanthropy. So I work in the Armstrong building. I work on Queen Victoria Road. That's where I hang out. Now, imagine a walk from Queen Victoria Road down Claremont Road. See it on a map and give yourself an eraser, a rubber. No philanthropy, rub out Newcastle University. No philanthropy, rub out the RVI. Go down Claremont Road, no philanthropy, rub out the Great North Museum, Hancock. So if you're in any doubt about the importance of philanthropy, just try and do that mental exercise. It really does matter, because trying to imagine a world without it is very, very difficult indeed. Philanthropy binds communities together, and I believe that we are in a great debt to our philanthropic forebears. I hope you can read this, because what I've tried to do is this. I've tried to show the domains of philanthropy, all the areas in which it's active, and try to just sort of imagine what the universal truth of something is. Forget all the strangeness of the past and try to think not of the motivations that people had in terms of their religion or saving their soul in distant times, but try and think of their intention. So in religion, you're trying to help propagate ideas and beliefs that help people live morally upright lives. That is a noble purpose. If you read on, the communities, to help improve the lives of the most vulnerable people in society. That again captures the essence of philanthropy over 900 years. And over 900 years, if you look at education, to help people acquire the knowledge needed to achieve their potential. Again, philanthropic creation. And go down to health, to look after, cure, or relieve the suffering of the injured, the sick, the aged, or people who are pregnant in gestation. Look at higher education, to help create, apply, and spread new knowledge. You work down this list. This is an important list of things that philanthropy does and engages with, many of them since medieval times, many of them. So what's the future then? Well, this is a little bit of me being preachy, I think. But basically, what I'm trying to say in this quote is this, that when there's great need and when there are great means, as there are today, philanthropy will occur. It will continue to occur because it is a great and noble institution. And that is all I'm trying to say in this rather long-winded quote. And then finally, I just want to end now with, I guess, three people I regard as heroic, two couples and an individual. The first is Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie was the greatest philanthropist ever to have lived because he said clearly why he was giving away the entirety of the massive fortune he had earned. And that is a wonderful quote. You can't take it with you, you know. And if you can't take it with you, better to do something good with it and be loved on earth rather than despised. You can't take it with you. It's important. It's an important thing. But what he's really talking about, and what all these three quotes are talking about, in modern times, Bill Gates and Melinda, and then locally, Lynn and Trevor, this is a quote, the bottom one, from Lynn during an interview I gave, is this. They're talking about two simple ideas. One, You are a steward for wealth and the gifts that are given to you, that you earn. You are a steward. Vartan Gregorian, head of the Carnegie Foundation in New York, said to Bill Gates on his first meeting, "You know it's not yours, Bill, don't you?" That's a powerful thing to say, and of course it was taken to heart by Bill Gates, as is well known. And the second thing that people are trying to say is we're giving back to make a difference. And Lynn there has said there's nothing wrong with wealth. It's a good thing. We all strive for better lives. But to recycle wealth is the important thing, that you have to give back to make a difference. And so on that note, I'm going to draw to a conclusion. Thank you very much. Okay.
Wow, 900 years of history in 40 minutes and just slightly a couple of seconds over. Not bad at all. Thank you very much, Charles. That's absolutely fascinating. We have got time for just a couple of questions, and I know we've got roving mics in the room. Hands up, anybody who has a question for Charles.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. Really enjoyed that. It's James Garrett from the Enviro Research Foundation. Is the promotion of philanthropy an admission of failure of the state and of taxation?
So a nice easy one to start off, Charles, and I'll hand over to you on that.
No.
Great! Next question. Right, next question.
Seriously, it's a great question. What is the relationship between the state and philanthropy? And essentially, it's a symbiotic relationship. The state, by its very omnipotence, cannot see into every quarter of life. There are needs emerge where people can see it. People who are active in communities can observe what is going wrong. And voluntary initiative is about filling those gaps. It's about moving into those places where the state cannot reach. So it is very important to remember that philanthropy has a tremendous place in society.
Thank you very much, Charles. Thank you. Once again, a round of applause for Charles.